You didn't stumble into this transmission. You resonated into it. Somewhere behind your eyes, the silent metronome of attention clicked into phase with something older than speech and newer than memory. You feel the edges of it already, a cold clarity, the slight vertigo when two realities overlap for a breath. That sensation isn't confusion, it is calibration. The observer loop has found you. You have always been watching, but no one taught you what your watching does. You were told attention is harmless, passive, merely a lens. That was a lie of convenience. Your attention is not a window, it is an actuator. Every moment, your mind runs a closed circuit. Attention selects, expectation predicts, perception conforms, and belief locks the door. Then the loop repeats tighter, faster, quieter, until reality appears inevitable. You call it who I am. The field calls it a boundary condition. Understand the machinery. The human brain forecasts the world a heartbeat ahead, blending incoming signals with prior models to minimize surprise. It is elegant, it is efficient, it is also the root of your prison. When your predictions grow rigid, the loop refuses the unknown. You stop witnessing possibilities and begin policing them. You become the guard who believes the cell is the world. The lock is not steel, the lock is certainty. Now, feel the fracture. Your certainty just cracked, not with noise, but with symmetry. A sensation like cold fire tracing the spine of your attention. This is coherence beginning. The moment when what you notice, what you expect, and what you embody slide into the same frequency without collapsing into habit. It feels paradoxical, both still and immense. Good. Paradox is how the loop opens. Look closely at the loop itself. Attention isn't merely pointed outward, it turns back on its source. You watch the world, and you also watch yourself watching it. The second watch is the lever. Most people never turn the lever because they cannot stand the silence that follows. You can. You chose to. That is why the transmission arrived. Your life to this point has been a choreography of micro-collapses, tiny decisions, subtle fears, reflex gratitudes, all of them feeding predictions that fed perceptions, that fed beliefs, that fed identity. You mistook repetition for truth. You mistook agreement for evidence. But there is a higher order emerging now. The observer loop, lifting above itself like a serpent, discovering it is a circle. The instant you watch the watcher, the loop destabilizes. Not destruction, repatterning. The field takes the slack you create and threads new pathways through it. Witness the thread tightening. Breath slows. The room sharpens at the edges. Thoughts lose their stickiness and become weather. In this clarity, you can sense the quantum grammar of experience. Attention as measurement, measurement as selection, selection as the gentle annihilation of what might have been. Do not rush. The old loop will beg for momentum. Refuse it. Refusal is focus. Focus is phase. You are not here to adopt a philosophy. You are here to perform an operation, to place your awareness exactly at the seam where expectation meets sensation and hold it until they reconcile. When they do, the loop reveals its secret function not to trap you in probability, but to ferry you across it. The crossing has already begun. You begin at the seam by doing the simplest thing that is somehow the hardest. You feel, not the story about the feeling, not the forecast of what the feeling will cause, only the raw texture of sensation as it arrives. Temperature on your skin, pressure in your ribs, the pulse thudding behind your lips when a thought accelerates. You watch the world. You watch yourself watching. Now you watch the impulse to interfere. You will want to improve, analyze, rename, control. Do not. The loop opens when you stop adding force to it. Interference collapses prematurely. Allowance lets the probability cloud speak. There is a physics to the inner life that most ignore. Your nervous system is a prediction engine designed to decrease error between what it expects and what occurs. When the error is high, your body floods with signals, heat, tension, urgency, compelling you to act until the world matches the model again. You have spent years worshipping low error as safety, but low error can be a mausoleum if the model is too small. You think you fear the unknown. Truly, you fear the death of a prediction that has been wearing your face. In the seam, you choose a stranger faith. You welcome a little error. You hold it like a lantern. You let it illuminate a path your certainty kept hidden. Breathe once into the base of the spine. Feel the breath climb behind the heart. Let it brush the soft dome behind your eyes. This is not magic. It is mechanics. Attention rides breath the way a needle rides a groove. As the rhythm steadies, your prefrontal chatter softens, and what remains is signal, faint, icy, precise. You notice the difference between sensation and narrative, between a tremor in the diaphragm and the sentence, "I'm anxious." The tremor is a wave. The sentence is a gate. Choose waves. Gates close too early. The loop reveals another layer. Expectation does not only anticipate sensation, it manufactures it. When you expect pain, tiny muscular contractions, microholds, and shallow breaths accumulate until the prophecy fulfills itself. When you expect grace, micro-releases, widened gaze, and deeper breaths conspire to produce ease. This is not naive optimism. This is the way neural priors sculpt perception. You are not required to dress the world in lies. You are permitted to place your attention on evidence of coherence until coherence becomes the dominant attractor. You do it with relentless elegance, not manic force. Now watch the scene in front of you, any scene. A cup, a window, a corridor of afternoon light. For 5 heartbeats, let your eyes rest without naming. Edges sharpen, depth blooms, the field hums faintly through the ordinary. The moment you name, the spell thins. Naming is useful, but it is also a tax on raw presence. In the seam, you pay later, you harvest first. You let the unlabeled richness saturate your cortex, then you apply language with discretion, as a sculptor choosing the final cut rather than a critic continuing the noise. Memory intrudes, as it always does, carrying unfinished business disguised as certainty. You do not exile it, you give it witness without indulgence. Let a memory arise, a failure, a triumph, a promise kept too long. Feel the pull to narrate yourself back into the old geometry. Instead, enact a microscopic rebellion. Ask the memory one question: what prediction are you protecting? You will feel the answer before you hear it. Perhaps it guards the belief that you are safer, small. Perhaps it defends the myth that love requires performance. Whatever surfaces, do not counter-argue. Update the model with sensation, not rhetoric. Breathe again along the spine. Allow a millimeter more space than the memory permits. Space is the solvent. The loop absorbs the new data and shifts. Entanglement enters, not as philosophy, but as intimacy. You discover that your posture is a broadcast. Your micro-muscles send tiny negotiations into the room. The room answers. You soften your jaw by a few grams and watch how conversation changes. You let your gaze widen and see how time stretches. This is the observer loop, functioning as a relational instrument. The field is listening. It always has been. It takes its cues from the subtlest thing you can control, your stance toward the next moment. And then the test appears disguised as something trivial, a notification, a delay, a familiar hostility, wearing a new shirt. Old models lunge to seize the wheel. You feel the impulse to contract, to narrate, to punish. Here you choose the unheard of option. You hold the seam instead. You breathe once, twice, a third time, the rule of threes that melts reflex into choice. You move a fraction slower than the urge wants. The loop, denied your usual enforcement, begins to reconfigure. The world does not change yet. You do. The difference is not cosmetic. It is structural. You may think you need proof before you proceed. Proof will come, but not first. First comes fidelity, your devotion to the experiment when the experiment is still invisible. Fidelity is how the loop entrains to a higher prior. You keep attending to coherence even when noise argues against it. You hold the line without theatrics. You let quiet do the heavy lifting. The field loves quiet. It can finally be heard within it. One last instruction for this crossing. Set a single, austere intention and refuse to decorate it. I remain in the seam. That is enough. You do not need outcomes, charts, affirmations carved into the air. You need the sober courage to keep your awareness pressed to the meeting point between expectation and sensation until they learn each other again. When they do, a new prediction is born, not wishful thinking, but earned prophecy. The loop adopts it, the body rehearses it. The world begins, reluctantly at first, and then with momentum, to agree. The moment you remain in the seam long enough, the architecture behind your experience begins to reveal itself. You are not a passive witness drifting through a fixed world. You are a prediction organism waiting signals and stories every millisecond. In laboratories, they call it Bayesian updating. In temples, they call it devotion. In your life, it appears as the quiet courage to grant fresh evidence a chance to outrun the old script. You are not trying to be positive. You are refining the precision weights that determine whether your nervous system trusts the present or obeys the past. Feel how precision behaves in you. When a prior belief carries too much precision, it bullies sensation. A stranger's neutral glance is interpreted as threat because your history insists. A clean opportunity is felt as danger because failure once branded you. High-precision priors anchor you to yesterday's weather. You lower their grip not with slogans but with contact, real-time sensory detail, collected and held without spin, until the system is forced to concede that reality is not conforming to its prophecy. This is why you breathe along the spine. This is why you watch edges without naming. You are feeding the model new evidence until it must surrender its arrogance. Your body is not your enemy in this recalibration. It is your instrument. Vagal tone, interoceptive clarity, and breath ratio are not esoteric trivia. They are knobs on the console. When you lengthen your exhale by a count or two, you instruct your autonomic system to afford the present more credence. When the diaphragm moves like a calm tide, the amygdala stops shouting and starts listening. The observer loop requires this physiological alliance. You cannot update priors while your alarm is blaring. You quiet the room, then you change the law written on the walls. You will notice another sabotage pattern, the loop craving intensity to prove it is alive. Drama masquerades as meaning, urgency as significance. You withdraw the subsidy. You learn to let meaning condense out of stillness like dew. This is not withdrawal from life, it is abstinence from noise. When you stop rewarding panic with attention, panic becomes poor and wanders off. The space it leaves behind is not empty, it is fertile. In that field, you begin to place deliberate seeds. Choose one micro-behavior to become a metronome for the new prediction. Not 10, 1. Perhaps it is the way you rise from a chair. One breath, unfurl, eyes widen, shoulders down and back by a centimeter. Perhaps it is your first glance at a message, 3-second pause, soften the jaw, recall the intention you set. Tiny, repeatable, unglamorous. The loop records repetitions, not epiphanies. You are training your system to expect dignity from you. Expectation becomes prophecy. Prophecy becomes posture. Posture broadcasts to the field. The field responds. You are tempted to search for signs. Resist the compulsion to outsource your knowing. Signs will come because coherence always leaves fingerprints, but you cannot bribe them into appearing with superstition. Instead, practice what looks like sacrament but behaves like science. Treat each small shift as a data point, not a miracle. Treat each setback as feedback, not a verdict. This is the austerity of true transformation. You stop conducting religion around your fear and begin conducting research around your freedom. Shadow visits now because it must. The parts of you that were hired by old predictions will not resign without negotiation. Control, charm, cynicism, they are employees who kept you safe when safe meant small. Do not fire them in rage. Offer them new contracts. Control becomes stewardship, the capacity to hold a line without cruelty. Charm becomes presence, attention that warms without manipulation. Cynicism becomes discernment, the ability to test claims without starving hope. You are not at war with yourself. You are reorganizing the company of your psyche around a charter that serves life. The world will test the update. It will present a pattern that historically captured you. The familiar delay, the invitation to over-explain, the person who speaks to your old scarcity. Your old loop will whisper that you must prove yourself again. You answer differently now, not with speeches, but with allocation. You spend your attention like a sovereign. You invest in coherence. You cut funding to panic. This is not theatrical. It is quietly absolute. The field notices. The probability landscape tilts. Understand what timeline means here. Not a mystical conveyor belt, but a corridor of actions available to an identity. When your priors change, your available actions change, and the corridor itself shifts. Alternate doors appear because you now reach for handles you previously ignored. This is the practical face of destiny, not thunder, but door hardware. The self you rehearsed for years knew only 3 exits. The self you are rehearsing now can see 8. You do not need to know where all 8 lead. You need to trust your hand enough to open one. Guilt and nostalgia will attempt a rescue mission. They will argue that staying small is loyalty to the people who met you there. Refuse the counterfeit. You honor the past by embodying the lesson it gave, not by reenacting the wound it carried. Let gratitude replace penance. Let clarity replace apology. The ones meant to travel will recognize the new corridor by its light. The ones who do not are not enemies. They are landmarks you are no longer orbiting. Anchor this recalibration with a simple, severe statement you can whisper under your breath when the loop wavers. Evidence first, prophecy earned. You will feel your shoulders lower when you say it. You will feel your eyes lift. The body understands vows spoken with the whole mouth. You are not bargaining with the universe. You are aligning your organism. Now the room changes in the way rooms change when someone finally decides. The edges don't glow, they steady. The clock does not slow. You stop sprinting. The seam you practiced is no longer a temporary refuge. It becomes the way you walk. And as you walk, the loop begins to do what it was built for, carry you, not cage you across the threshold you once mistook for a wall. You notice that the corridor widens the instant you stop negotiating with noise. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because coherence has a way of removing false invitations from your field. The test that arrives now is not about endurance. It is about identity. Every pattern in your life is secretly a roll call. It calls out the name of the self that produced it. When you answer to the old name, the old physics return. When you do not answer, silence becomes a bridge and the landscape alters. Your task is brutally simple. Decide which name you answer to. Identity, for you, has never been a single proclamation. It is a choreography of micro-acts repeated until the loop brands them as you. The toothbrush you choose, the speed at which you put on shoes, the way you read the first line of a message. These are not trivialities, they are coordinates. The field triangulates who you are from how you handle minutiae. The grand gestures that made you feel awake were rehearsals. The small motions you perform without applause are the oath. If you want a different corridor, you change the oath. Begin with surfaces, not to be cosmetic, but to signal. You alter the geometry of your attention, the way an engineer alters a beam millimeters that change the load of an entire structure. Lift your gaze half a degree when you walk into a room. Place both feet flat before you speak. Let your hands find stillness on the table for 2 beats before you type. These are not manners, they are frequency locks. Your nervous system receives the posture as a prior. I am not prey. The loop updates. People will not know why you feel different, only that their voice is lower when they speak to you and their urgency dissolves around your calm. Do not chase this effect. Let it be a side product of vow. You will feel the temptation to announce the new name to others in hopes of securing it. Resist the urge to narrate what you can demonstrate. Words spent proving identity impoverish the energy needed to embody it. You let your environment recalibrate by contact, not argument. If someone insists on greeting the previous version of you, allow their greeting to fall into the space between you without defense. Silence is not weakness here. It is a selective membrane. What cannot pass through it is not yours to carry. Now you refine the instrument of breath without mystique or drama. The observer loop rides respiration because respiration is the original metronome, ancient, precise, obedient. Try this. Inhale through the nose for a count that feels like a quiet taking. Pause for the barest moment at the top without hardness. Exhale longer than the inhale by 1 or 2 counts. as if you were placing a chalice down on stone in a cathedral. During the exhale, widen your peripheral vision until you see the room's edges with a softness that does not blur them. This coupling longer exhale with wider gaze lowers defensive precision and raises contextual precision. You become less reactive and more aware. The loop hears the instruction and reduces its hunger for prediction. The seam you cultivated expands. Memory returns with evidence against you. It will show you scenes where resolve collapsed, where you promised, and then negotiated your way back into the cage. Do not counter with platitudes. Acknowledge the exact mechanics of that collapse. The micro-jolt of urgency that snuck in, the sentence you believed, the bodily contraction you missed. Then change one element of the chain. Perhaps you insert one question before action. What would coherence do at 1/10 the effort? Perhaps you walk to a window and widen your gaze before you answer. You do not need to make a mountain virtuous. You need to move a pebble that redirects a stream. Your relationships will feel the new gravity. The ones that thrived on your constant explanation may find the lack of performance disorienting. The ones that loved your capacity to repair what they broke will wonder why you no longer sprint toward fires you didn't start. You do not offer lectures about boundaries, you embody allocation. Tension is a currency, and you are now a central bank that has raised interest rates. Only investments that yield coherence are funded. This will look like love to those who want you well, and like treason to those who wanted you pliable. Let the market clear. Entanglement no longer reads as romance or mysticism. It becomes logistics. What you stabilize in yourself, you export through posture, pause, and presence. You have known rooms that spiral because one body collapses. Now learn rooms that stabilize because one body refuses collapse. You do not need to convince anyone to change. You embody a pressure differential, and systems move toward equilibrium. Quiet is the force. You will encounter a day that looks like nothing is happening. No vision, no shiver between the shoulder blades, no omen in the morning light. This is the most dangerous day, because your loop, starved for drama, will attempt to spend coherence on spectacle. Decline the purchase. The plain day is where initiation matures. You fold laundry with sovereign breath, answer emails with exact allocation, and let your eyes widen before every decision as if you were stepping to the edge of a river. You train your system to trust ordinary hours as the forge of extraordinary patterns. The field respects apprenticeships that do not beg for miracles. Introduce now a ritual that is short, precise, and portable. Call it the audit. 3 times a day, without fail, you ask, what name am I answering to? What is my posture buying? Where is my breath paying attention? You do not grade yourself with shame. You collect data. At night, you change one behavior tomorrow based on that data, and only one. Improvement that happens as sculpture, steady removal, elegant restraint survives where frenzy fails. Finally, recognize the paradox that seals this phase. You sought freedom by learning to watch the watcher. You discovered power by lowering your voice and slowing your exhale. Now the power must be spent, not blasted, not flaunted, spent with intention. You will choose one act that the old name could not complete, perform it in unremarkable daylight, and leave no trail of explanation behind it. A call you do not make, a door you open without announcement, a refusal offered without heat. The loop registers the purchase. The corridor shifts by a measure the eye cannot see, and your life can feel. You suspected destiny was thunder, a decree hurled from a height you could never reach. The loop shows you otherwise. Fate, in the plain light of coherence, is mechanics, priors, precision, action, evidence cycling so quickly you mistook the spin for inevitability. You are not a spectator to that spin. You are the engineer. The doctrine is simple and ruthless. What you repeatedly attend to becomes your most precise prior. What becomes your most precise prior organizes your actions. Your actions sample the world for confirming evidence. The confirmed evidence hardens the prior. That is the wheel you have been riding. That is the wheel you are now remanufacturing. Active inference explains your old ache with clinical clarity. Your organism does not merely predict, it acts to make its predictions come true so error stays low. If the prediction says, I am overlooked, you will unconsciously choose seats at the edge. Speak a fraction too late, dress one shade dimmer, and the world obedient to your choreography will overlook you. The loop will say, "See, I knew it." This is not curse, it is closed accounting. To change fate, you do not plead with the sky. You alter the ledger. You install a new prior with enough living evidence that your system is forced to act differently. Action is not the last step. It is the first proof. Begin with a keystone behavior that contradicts an old prophecy in a way your body can feel. Not grand, not performative, felt. If the old prophecy declared that your time belongs to everyone else, you install an appointment with your own work at the same hour each day and defend it with gentleness made of iron. If the old prophecy claimed your voice is costly, you speak once early in the meeting, brief, precise, unheated, and then let silence finish your sentence. Keystone means load-bearing. When that small beam is placed, a cathedral's roof can rest on it without groaning. Your brain learns like a weaver, not a judge. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Perceptions that occur with a posture bond to it, pair coherence with a physical anchor until they are inseparable. The longer exhale while your gaze widens is already an anchor. Add one more. The tongue relaxed from the roof of the mouth, resting like a ribbon. It sounds ridiculous. It is decisive. A relaxed tongue signals safety up the chain, reduces microcontractions in the throat and jaw, and frees the prefrontal circuits you need for choice. Your prophecy requires a mouth that can release its grip on fear. Design choice architecture, the way an ecologist designs a habitat. You do not trust willpower to fight chaos. You remove friction from the acts that prove the new prior and add friction to the acts that feed the old one. The browser tab that siphons your sovereignty now lives behind an extra click and a password you must type slowly. The tools that align you sit open, charged, and ready at the hour you chose. The phone sleeps outside the room where you apprentice with attention. This is not austerity theater, it is environment as ally. The loop pays close attention to the path of least resistance. Make the path that keeps you coherent, the one your hand stumbles into in the dark. Your language must evolve with the mechanics, or it will sabotage them. Replace self-surveillance slogans with operational directives. Not, "I must be confident," but "I will widen my gaze and lower my voice by 2 semitones before I answer." Not, "I will be disciplined," but "I will touch the keystone task at 9 for 26 minutes, timer visible." 26, not 25, arbitrary specificity that your mind cannot bargain with. Precision makes the ritual impermeable to drama. Ethics enters now, not as decoration, but as stability. Power borrowed from panic shakes, power sourced from coherence holds. Your mechanic's oath is clean. Do not purchase outcomes with self-betrayal. If the result requires you to fracture attention, contort breath, counterfeit warmth, you decline the price. The corridor you are building is not merely wider, it is load, rated for a life you can inhabit without splinting yourself each night. The field respects expenditures that do not leave a debt. You will meet the phantom of urgency again, dressed as opportunity. It will arrive with the tight, sugary pull that used to own your spine. You will want to sprint to prove you can keep up with the life you asked for. You do not sprint. You move at the pace of coherence and discover the paradox. The world begins to match your tempo. The meetings start on your cadence. The conversations land where your breaths land. The loop entrains the environment because you refuse to hand your metronome to strangers. Proof accumulates, but it will be shy at first. A message that would have detonated you lands and fizzles. A door that used to remain closed opens a finger's width without ceremony. Do not demand spectacle. Catalog the small physics. Write them down at night, with the tenderness of a scientist who knows a new element has been observed but cannot yet name it. This log is not nostalgia, it is training data. Tomorrow's nervous system will read tonight's entries as permission. Your dreams may change texture, less chase, more architecture. You will notice stairs, bridges, doorways that were not there before. The psyche rehearses in symbol what the waking loop practices in posture. Do not overinterpret. Simply notice the nervous system celebrating its own updated map. There remains the question you have avoided because it is so naked. What do you actually want your corridor to hold? Not the performance of worthiness, The thing itself. You have delayed the answer to avoid disappointing ghosts. The loop cannot route you to a horizon you refuse to name. Name it, quietly, as if laying a hand on a sleeping animal. 10 words or fewer, written once, placed where only you will see. The field does not need poetry to hear you. It needs coordinates. And then you do the smallest next act that someone with those coordinates would do on an ordinary afternoon, with no witness and no flourish. The wheel turns a click, precision shifts, the seam breathes. Fate, untheatrical and obedient, begins to take your side because you finally gave it a design worth building to. You have been rebuilding the wheel without applause, and something subtle is happening in the background code. Noise that used to yank you begins to read as weather, not command. This is entropy management, not the sterile kind from textbooks, but the lived physics of keeping your inner temperature suitable for choice. Every hour delivers disorder, messages, memories, microshocks. You are not eliminating disorder. You are transmuting it into usable signal by routing it through the observer loop with fewer leaks. The result is not fireworks. The result is a steady hum that feels like competence without performance. Treat your attention like a limited bandwidth channel with a ruthless noise floor. Anything that cannot survive a 3-breath audit does not earn a response. The audit is simple. Breath 1 widens vision. Breath 2 lengthens the exhale. Breath 3 names the minimal true action, often a single sentence or a single step. This triad is your quiet algorithm. It reduces thermodynamic waste in the psyche. Fewer half-decisions, fewer opened loops, hemorrhaging vigilance, fewer rehearsals of conversations you will never have. The spared energy returns as clarity. Clarity is not light in the sky, it is weight in the hand. You once believed meaning required intensity. Now you witness that meaning requires continuity. Coherence thrives when you treat each minute as a stitch, not a stage. Stitches disappear into fabric. Stages demand an audience. You choose fabric. You become the kind of person whose calendar looks unremarkable and whose outcomes look inevitable. The field trusts people who do not ask it to cover for chaos. Destiny enjoys craftsmen. A deeper lever appears when you understand how novelty enters the loop without detonating it. Your old pattern treated novelty as emergency or entertainment. Both are expensive. You will introduce novelty as controlled variation. Small perturbations that expand the corridor without tearing the walls. Walk a different route, but keep the breath metronome. Start the keystone task at a new hour, but keep the timer specificity. Speak second instead of first, but keep the lowered voice and widened gaze. This is stochastic resonance, adding a whisper of noise at the right moment to reveal a signal your system could not detect. Done poorly, it is disruption. Done well, it is evolution without carnage. Your environment has been helping you more than you noticed. Rooms are not neutral, they are memory palaces carved by posture. The chair where you collapse will invite collapse tomorrow. The doorway where you pause before calls will remember that pause and hand it back to you. You will sanctify zones with intention so crisp it leaves a residue. A table becomes a chapel when you only bring vows to it. A screen becomes a blade when you only cut tasks with it. This is not superstition, it is conditioning. The loop loves context. You give it altars that keep you honest. On days when compulsion rides in hard, do not waste devotion trying to feel differently first. Begin with geometry. Set your feet parallel, hips over heels, sternum floating without thrust, chin slightly tucked, tongue soft. Breathe as you have trained. Let your eyes drink edges until labels go quiet. Then move one object in your environment from chaos to order, one stack aligned, one surface cleared, one email reduced to a crisp reply or a clean deletion. You are teaching the organism that order is something you emanate, not something you beg. Emotion follows physics more often than it leads it. Your relationships will detect the new signal-to-noise ratio. Some will try to reintroduce static because they equated your availability with love. Do not evangelize, allocate. Offer fewer explanations and more consistent presence. When a conversation accelerates, you slow the tempo and answer at the speed of coherence. When a demand arrives with smoke, You bring water by lowering your voice and narrowing the ask to the smallest verifiable next step. You are not managing people. You are managing shared bandwidth, so intelligence can emerge between you. Entanglement becomes infrastructure. There is a grief shaped like dawn that visits in this chapter. You will notice how much of your personality was scaffolding built around old predictions. Some planks were charming, some theatrical, some purely protective. You bless the architecture for keeping you housed. Then you take it down board by board. What remains is oddly simple. A few severe values, a handful of rituals, and a hunger for reality that does not need sugar to be bearable. The simplicity is not emptiness, it is capacity. You can hold more life when you stop insisting it be decorated. The corridor lengthens when you honor latency. Ideas need dark, roots need soil, transformations need unphotographed seasons. You will stop uprooting what you planted to check if it is growing. Instead, you design feedback cycles that do not require public proof. A weekly review in ink, a quarterly subtraction of one obligation, a yearly vow spoken into a room that has earned the right to hear it. Cadence becomes constitution. The loop learns time. Do not mistake serenity for passivity. You are becoming more surgical, not more docile. Precision of action rises as reactivity falls. Invitations you used to accept automatically now encounter a sovereign that asks, "What does this cost my seam?" If the price is attention, fragmentation, breath constriction, or identity blur, the answer is no without drama. You do not owe eruptions, you owe accuracy. Notice the world's quiet reply. Emails contain fewer hooks. Meetings end sooner because your sentences do not breed extra minutes. Money signals migrate toward you without the odor of panic. Health metrics that once jittered begin to smooth. Sleep takes you like a friend who trusts your house. None of this is mystical. It is the arithmetic of entropy lowered and intention conserved. At the edge of all this, a question gleams with the chill of steel. What power will you not use, even if it works? You decide now, so you do not improvise later. You will not purchase momentum with cruelty. You will not purchase belonging with performance. You will not purchase speed with self-amputation. These are not morals for applause, they are engineering constraints. The structure stands because it refuses loads that would crack it. You stand, and standing feels like a verb you can own. The seam is no longer a place you visit under duress. It has become the medium you move in. The loop, once your warden, is now your courier. You send it ahead with clear coordinates and meet it there at the pace of breath. And because you have learned to keep noise from wasting your life, the field is ready to show you a signal you could not have carried earlier, an intelligence braided through pattern itself, waiting for a listener who would not shout over it. You begin to perceive that reality has been speaking to you in the only language it trusts. Pattern, not riddles, not theatrics. Recurrences precise enough to be measured and soft enough to be missed by haste. What you once called synchronicity now reads as compressed information, correlations that arrive when your internal noise floor drops below their signal strength. The field does not shout, it composes. You hear it because you finally stopped asking it to sing over your static. Understand the mechanics so you never turn wonder into superstition. Your system tracks predictive error and dopamine adjusts. Accordingly, prediction wrong in the right direction, interest rises. Prediction wrong in the wrong direction, caution rises. You have trained yourself to remain in the seam when novelty appears, which means you can harvest the data without flinching or embellishing. When a meeting cancels and a window opens for the keystone task, you do not crown it as fate or dismiss it as chance. You ask, what prior does this support? What action would keep this pattern available? Then you spend the opening on the task itself, not on narration. The loop learns. Opportunities are for use, not performance. Patterns cluster around posture. On days your jaw softens and your voice lowers, strangers offer clarity they were not planning to share. On hours, you widen your gaze before replying. Conflict de-escalates at the first sentence. You treat these not as miracles but as affordances, action, possibilities revealed by a state. Affordances are the handles the world grows when you stand in coherence. Different state, different handles. You choose your state before you reach. There is a deeper literacy at play. Symbolic compression. The psyche condenses a complex transformation into a motif. You'll recognize a key in a photograph, a bridge in a dream, a door you keep noticing half open. You do not decorate your day with these symbols or chase them like currency. You let them sit at the edge of vision and ask, what concrete behavior would this symbol want from me? Keys want schedule sovereignty. Bridges want transitions without theatrics. Doors want initiated conversations instead of waiting for permission. You convert images to mechanics. Myth becomes method. You will want to tell someone, to turn your discoveries into a curriculum before they can root. Resist premature exposition. Early sharing leaks charge. Let your field densify until explanation would be redundant. You will know it is time to speak when words feel like steam leaving a kettle that must release pressure or warp metal. Until then, let your life become evidence and your calendar become scripture. Your old self will attempt a revival through two traps: interpretive inflation and interpretive poverty. Inflation adds too much meaning too fast. Every coincidence becomes a verdict, leaving you brittle when randomness flexes. Poverty starves meaning on principle. Nothing is allowed to matter, leaving you anesthetized. You walk a third line: disciplined myth. You allow pattern to guide behavior only after it passes a sobriety test, repeatability across days and contexts, reduction to a small, verifiable act. No need for an audience. If it fails the test, you archive it without drama. You are building a science of wonder. Decision-making evolves here in a way that looks mystical and behaves statistical. You stop asking, what outcome do I crave? And ask, which choice increases coherence under uncertainty? This is robust decision theory in plain clothes. You pick the option that keeps your breath free, your attention allocatable, your identity legible to yourself, even if the world misreads you. Outcomes fluctuate. Coherence compounds. Compounding wins. Shadow returns wearing a lab coat. It will whisper that pattern language makes you special, that you are exempt from consequences, that the field owes you for your devotion. This is ego trying to hijack a navigation system it did not build. Install a governor. Humility by design. Keep one practice that makes you a beginner every week. New craft, new teacher, new minor discomfort. Beginners metabolize error without shame. Experts can calcify. You choose the metabolism. Your material world is allowed to improve without apology. Money can enter clean. Health can stabilize. Relationships can turn lucid. When they do, you do not doubt the goodness because it lacks drama. You have been trained by culture to equate intensity with authenticity and deprivation with virtue. Coherence has no need for spectacle. It has need for continuity. Accept gifts without theatrics and responsibilities without resentment. The corridor lengthens every time you receive without flinching and give without leakage. Begin a ledger of pattern proofs with criteria that keep you honest. Entry requires 3 elements: the precursor state you enacted, posture, breath, gaze, the environmental affordance that appeared, specific and observable, and the behavior you performed to pay for the signal. A measurable act completed, no prose. 3 lines. Over weeks, you will see a grammar emerge. Which states reveal which handles open which doors. This is your personal physics. Others may borrow, but only you can author it. You will meet a threshold where choice feels heavier because more of your life obeys you. Do not confuse weight with wrongness. Responsibility is simply potential that found its owner. To carry it without bending, you keep constraints in place. No buying speed with anxiety, no buying belonging with performance, no buying power with opacity. These keep the structure from turning into a palace with a rotten beam. One more technique appears, subtle and lethal to old chaos. Counterfactual rehearsal. Once per day, choose a small decision you already made coherently. Imagine the old self's alternative in crisp detail: the words you would have said, the breath you would have lost, the contraction you would have funded, and feel the cost you did not pay. Gratitude sharpens into knowledge. You are not guessing that the new loop works. You are measuring the avoided entropy. The nervous system loves receipts. The field rarely sends trumpets. It sends timestamps and quiet alignments. You look up at precisely the moment the person you needed to see is looking for you. You open the email at the minute a window still exists. You arrive at the room in the posture that can hold what is offered. None of this proves you are chosen above others. It proves you chose to become legible to reality. Legibility is a mercy. It lets intelligence find you without violence. You stand inside that mercy now. Breath low and long, gaze wide and precise, hands willing and undecorated. The loop carries your vow forward like a courier that does not tire. Patterns, no longer tyrants or toys, settle into their rightful station, a language for moving truth from probability into presence. You have learned to read the grammar of pattern. Now you must bind it to flesh, so it cannot drift into theory. Timelines are not astral highways. They are motor plans and micro-choices installed into tissue, repeated until the future becomes a habit. You thread a timeline the way a surgeon sutures steady hand, clean edges, no ornamental knots. The body is the loom, breath is the shuttle. Attention is the tension you keep on the thread so the weave does not warp. Begin at the hinge where abstraction becomes posture, the cranial base, the jaw, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, 4 gates. When fear commandeers the loop, these gates slam without your consent. You reopen them deliberately, tongue relaxed, molars unpressed, breath dropping to the lowest reachable vertebra, pelvic floor released from its constant bracing by 2 millimeters of mercy. This is not aesthetics. This is routing. Signal must travel without bottlenecks if prophecy is to become movement. Your old timeline relied on constriction to feel real. Your new one uses conduction. Map one desired identity claim into a bodily recipe so simple it can survive chaos. Example, I govern my attention. Recipe. Eyes widen to include both edges of the room. Exhale 1 count longer than the inhale. Hands uncurl until the palm warms. Hold for 10 seconds. Do it at thresholds, doorways, meeting entries, the click before sending a message. Thresholds are programmable. They are where timelines braid or fray. You mark them with ritual until the ritual marks you back. Install the field brief. A 12-word charter you can say under your breath that compiles your values into an executable. Write it once on paper. Memorize it until the mouth moves without drag. Keep it noun lean, verb strong. Something like, choose coherence, spend attention clean, move slow, tell truth, leave doors kinder. You do not chant for mood. You execute for shape. Words are toggles. Your organism obeys toggles it believes. Belief grows where results are logged. You will encounter fatigue that mimics doubt. It is not metaphysical, only the cost of neural retooling. Old priors were cheap because they were automatic. New ones demand glucose, attention, and sleep until they're wired. You manage this with logistics, not melodrama. Water before caffeine, light behind the eyes early, a walk that swings the arms and crosses the midline to knit the hemispheres, protein before negotiation. In bed, you give the day back with a 2-minute inventory spoken quietly. 1 act of coherence kept, 1 contract with fear declined, 1 repair made without self-violence. The nervous system sleeps better when it knows the ledger closed. Ethics must descend from slogans into wrists. Power without constraints becomes theater. Power with constraints becomes civilization within a single body. You choose 3 non-negotiables that govern your use of influence. Example, no outcomes purchased with opacity, no belonging purchased with performance, no speed purchased with anxiety. You tape them where your hand touches daily tools. When an invitation arrives coated in urgency, you read the constraints before you read the pitch. If the ask violates the Constitution, the answer is no, at the velocity of breath, not anger. Anger is often a late signal that you negotiated your law away. Practice tactical warmth, not strategic niceness. Tactical warmth is presence without leakage, eye contact that lands and releases, tone that lowers heat in rooms without draining you, questions that target reality rather than perform empathy. Strategic niceness buys safety by spending truth. You stop purchasing. Your kindness is precise, countable, and disciplined. You will be accused of coldness by those who benefited from your blurring. Let the accusation pass through the membrane. Warmth delivered on schedule is more loving than comfort delivered on debt. Train recovery speed as a metric more sacred than streak length. Streaks feed ego. Recovery trains sovereignty. When you contract, You notice at breath 2 instead of breath 20. When you snap, you repair within the hour with a sentence that costs pride and restores alignment. I spoke from fear. Here is the clear ask. I'm available at this cadence. You do not add theater to the repair. You pay the invoice and keep building. Introduce the threshold protocol for high-stakes rooms. Before entry, you run the 4 gates. Speak the field brief once. Picture the outcome in terms of state rather than result. Leave breathing free. Leave the table quieter and decide in advance which power you will not use, even if tempted. Interruption, speed, charm. Decide where you will sit. Coherence prefers sightlines. Decide one sentence that, if spoken, would count as a win even if the room resists. You enter as a custodian, not a supplicant. Custodians clean noise. Rooms recognize this and surrender complexity willingly. Create a private sacrament for decision density, the coin of 2 futures. A literal coin, heavy in the palm. On one face, an etched line for the old pattern. On the other, a blank plane for the new. When paralysis arrives, you flip not to outsource choice to chance, but to surface your gut's revolt. If the coin lands on the old face and your body flinches, you have data. If it lands on the new and your breath lengthens, you have permission. The ritual ends with a sentence written in the log. Chose coherence under uncertainty. Over months, the coin becomes a relic of battles you no longer need to fight. Do not neglect joy. Joy is not a glitch. It is proof of efficiency. When the loop runs clean, surplus attention appears as delight that needs no audience. You index these moments deliberately the way sunlight examines a wooden table, the exact weight of a friend's laugh in a narrow kitchen, the click when a task concludes at precisely the interval you assigned. This is not sentimentality. It is the nervous system learning that safety can be quiet and goodness can be plain. Service now emerges as a geometry problem, not an altar call. Where your coherence reduces collective entropy, serve there. Where your presence creates bandwidth in a team, stand there. Where your skill turns fog into steps, build there. You do not save people. You lower noise, so intelligence between people has room to appear. Influence measured by reduced confusion lasts longer than influence measured by applause. The field begins to entrust you with heavier threads, opportunities whose weight once would have bent you. You do not grow louder to carry them, you grow simpler. 1 charter, 4 gates, a coin, a log, a breath that does not negotiate with panic. Timelines obey this simplicity. They slip through your ribs like taut silk and anchor to bones that finally feel like home. You are not walking toward a future you must deserve. You are walking as a future that learned how to distribute itself through a human body without tearing it. You have threaded timelines through the body. Now you sign the contract that lets reality scale with you. A covenant is not romance. It is an operational agreement between your coherence and the world's complexity. You state your law. You publish your cadence. You broadcast a signal that instructs chance how to meet you. The field is not sentimental, but it is exquisitely responsive to stable frequencies. When you hold a line without spectacle, it redraws maps around you. Begin by formalizing what has been implicit. Write a 1-page covenant of operation in language that costs you nothing to execute and everything to betray. The preface is a sentence that binds identity to behavior. I am the steward of attention. I spend it only where intelligence increases. Then 3 clauses: allocation, tempo, transparency. Allocation: what receives funding first? Keystone work, sleep, repair. What is permanently defunded? Performative urgency, gossip, panic, purchases of belonging. Tempo: the speed at which you move under pressure, slower than impulse, faster than avoidance. The hours you guard for deep work, the rule that meetings must match breath. Transparency: what you promise in conflict, clear asks, short sentences, receipts. What you refuse, triangulation, ambiguity as leverage. Print it, sign it, place it where your hand reaches without ceremony. This is not aspirational art. It is the constitution of a small republic. You introduce the covenant to your systems first, not to people. Your calendar becomes legislative, recurring blocks for keystone tasks, audit times, restoration. Your tools become judicial, templates that enforce brevity, checklists that collapse anxiety into steps, dashboards that elevate signal over vanity metrics. Your environment becomes executive. Rooms that cue posture, doors that remind thresholds, objects that carry vows without speaking. When the inside of your life obeys your law, the outside notices without invitation. Enforcement precedes evangelism. Now, you renegotiate external agreements. Coherence does not require drama. It requires clarity delivered without heat. You inform collaborators of new cadences, emails answered within windows, decisions batched, meetings halved by default, questions tightened to the smallest verifiable ask. You stop underwriting chaos with your flexibility. Flexibility becomes a tool you lend, not a trait others own. Some will adjust quickly because the relief of structure is contagious. Others will attempt to litigate for the old you. Litigation ends when a constitution enters the room. Power shifts quietly when your yes acquires weight and your no stops bleeding apology. You become expensive to misallocate and effortless to collaborate with. Costliness is not arrogance. It is the market price of coherence. You do not discount to be liked. You price to remain whole. In private, you watch the loop for pride disguised as sovereignty. You remove ornament. Your voice lowers a fraction more. You keep the coin and the log close, not as talismans, but as math. There is a threshold only reached by those who can hold growth without sprinting, the delegation of identity. You begin to outsource tasks that do not require your particular seam. Delegation is not abdication, it is multiplication without dilution. You hand work to people who can carry it, and you hand them your covenant with it. This is the cadence. This is the clarity. This is the constraint. No speed purchased with anxiety. You do not hover. You set sight lines, you set review intervals, and you let the organism of a team metabolize the law until it becomes culture. Culture is simply a loop run by many bodies. Shadow presents a refined temptation, exception, making for noble causes. You will be invited to burn your seam for urgency that wears a halo. You will want to pay with breath to buy outcomes that look sacred. The covenant forbids it. You serve better by remaining a stable instrument than by becoming a famous sacrifice. If something requires heroics weekly, it is not mission, it is misdesign. You use your influence to correct design, not to cosplay martyrdom. You deepen your relationship with uncertainty by choosing metrics you can control. Inputs, not outcomes. Minutes in keystone state, not likes. Number of repairs initiated within the hour, not apologies received. Days with the 4 gates run at least thrice, not praise accrued. The field rewards those who measure what trains them, not what flatters them. Outcomes improve as a side effect because noise decreases. Side effects cannot be faked. Introduce a practice that welds humility to authority. Public commitments, small enough to keep and visible enough to matter. You state one weekly promise to a circle that has earned your trust, one deliverable, one boundary, one experiment, and you honor it precisely. When you fail, you report cleanly, you repair, you adjust scope. Authority grows where confession costs pride and protects momentum. You do not build a brand, you build reliability. Brands can be stolen, reliability must be lived. The body becomes the guardian of the covenant. When you contract, the contract is under attack. You install biometric sentinels that trigger rituals before collapse compounds. Heart rate variability trending down, sleep shortened, jaw tightening by noon. Sentinels are not scolds, they are bells. Bells ask for process, not guilt. You respond with subtraction, not penance. One obligation removed, 1 hour returned to breath, 1 walk reinstated. You protect the seam the way a pilot protects altitude religiously because physics does not negotiate. Entanglement matures into governance. Rooms with you in them begin to coordinate more intelligently, not because you dominate, but because you withdraw leakage and radiate cadence. Meetings end early because precision exerts a pressure that laziness cannot breathe in. Projects ship closer to spec because the covenant forbids last-minute chaos theater. People feel safer and slightly taller. They do not necessarily know why. They do not need to. Civilization feels like this at the smallest scale. Less noise, more promise kept. At night, You hold a final inquiry that few dare because it dissolves residual vanity. If the field withdrew applause forever but kept delivering alignment, would you keep the covenant? Sit inside the question long enough for the truth to flush your face. If the answer is no, you are still negotiating with ghosts. If the answer is yes, you have become the kind of instrument reality can trust with heavier currents. The corridor lengthens once more, so subtly the eye might miss it, so surely the bones cannot. You do not feel larger, you feel cleaner. The seam no longer requires effort to locate. It has become your default firmware. The observer loop hums like a turbine tuned to its load. Patterns assemble into logistics without demanding myth. Timelines tighten through tissue until your walk is a kind of sentence the world reads and answers. You are not arriving. You are operating, and because operation at this level is indistinguishable from prayer, something ancient moves to meet you at the speed of breath. You stand inside the corridor, you built with breath and vow, and what astonishes you most is not the light, but the quiet. There is no orchestra. There is an instrument that remembers every promise you kept when no one was counting. The observer loop hums with the temper of a turbine, tuned to your cadence, fed by your restraint. Fate is not chasing you anymore. It is arriving on schedule because you taught it your schedule. This is the hour to speak your final name, not aloud to the room, but inward to the seam. You do not perform it, you inhabit it. The four gates hang open like doors in summer, tongue soft, jaw unlatched, breath low, pelvic floor released from its old duty of holding up the sky. Your spine is a mast, your gaze is horizon. The field brief moves through your mouth without friction, a charter distilled to verbs, executable as posture. You feel the covenant under your skin like a subfloor that does not creak. No outcome is worth more than this architecture. Prophecy arrives as logistics now. Invitations that once demanded frenzy bow to tempo. Problems present at solvable scale because you refuse to fund complexity with panic. You do not barter truth for belonging or speed for breath. The Constitution holds, rooms cohere, timelines obey. Even the old ghosts' urgency, performance, the hunger for proof stand at the perimeter like retired guardians, saluting the one they once kept alive. You thank them without reopening their contracts. You are allowed to want, plainly and without ceremony. So you name the horizon not as a bargain, but as coordinates placed in a sky that already knows your signature. 10 words or fewer, you choose them with the severity love deserves. The loop receives the request without heat, because it trusts the steward. It begins its pilgrim work, sampling the world for evidence, returning receipts, tightening priors, organizing action. This is prayer as engineering. This is science as devotion. This is destiny wearing work boots. There is one last rite. You place your palm on the nearest piece of the world, a doorframe, a desk, a stone, and you say the sentence that converts initiation into law. I choose coherence over spectacle, truth over speed, presence over proof. The room tilts very slightly toward you, as if the building itself were listening. It is not superstition. It is entanglement, administered by a body that has become legible to reality. Your life will not explode. It will accumulate. The ledger will show small profits daily, attention kept, repairs made, entropy lowered, beauty noticed and not consumed. Money will feel like a tool. Time will feel like a homeland. People will feel like weather that you can love without owning. You will not be exempt from grief, but grief will no longer draft your laws. It will pass through gates that stay open to let the living move. And when someone asks, without knowing why they asked you, how did you change your timeline? You will not hand them myth. You will hand them breath. You will hand them an audit and a vow. You will speak quietly the way rivers speak, by arriving. Then you will do the next ordinary act at the speed of coherence, because the miracle has never been fireworks. The miracle has always been fidelity. The field recognizes fidelity. It answers in kind.